Hi guys, welcome. And who dat? I'm Joe. If you're part of the Who Dat family, thanks for coming into the channel. Rosenfield 10 is here to talk about the Saints. I'm like a family member or a coworker, and you see me and you know we both like the Saints, so let's talk about it. Now I'm not going to report on them. I like to bring up the news when it happens, but I'm more of just a guy that likes to talk about the Saints. And I figure if I'm going to talk about them, let me talk to the Who Dat family. You guys leave your comments and let me know what you think. I'm going to do a video today trying to predict what I think the Saints could do this year. So I wanted to wait until the week leading up to the first game of the regular season, and then how am I viewing things? I've got a couple of categories here and a bunch of players we're going to talk about, and they're all hypotheticals, and nobody knows, and I certainly don't. I'm confused. Part of me thinks this team's not good enough to win 5 or 6 games. Part of me thinks if this team puts it all together and plays to their abilities, then perhaps we can win 10 games, 11 games. There's a scenario we could go 13-4. There's a scenario where we could go 4-13. And it's bewildering. I mean, you really don't know. We're going to have to be in the middle of it before we start to get a grasp, I think. The beginning of the schedule is brutal. The first 6 games include 3 divisional games and 3 games against playoff teams: Dallas, Philadelphia, Kansas City. Kind of expect to lose those 3. And then if you want to take control of this NFC South, you're going to have to win the 3 divisional games. So the first 6 games, if the Saints are good, we could still only be 3-3. So it's going to be tough. I mean, we could have a pretty decent team and still come out of that first 6-game stretch 2-5, something like that. And if that happens, and then Game 7 is against Sean Payton in the Dome, and we lose that one, then yeah, the whole season's off the rails. Doesn't matter if we crawl back into mediocrity at that point. We're going to want serious change. So I'm going to go ahead and predict rather I have no idea what I want to do. Part of me thinks pessimistic 7-10. And really, a pessimistic view would be just the same of what we've seen the last 2 years, which was 7-10, and then we improved to 9-8. If we have a 1-game improvement and we're 10-7, I can't say the head coach and the team and the players are doing a bad job if we finish 10-7. I mean, it's rather close to mediocrity. But 9-8 would have gotten you in the playoffs last year had you won a few tiebreakers here or there. 10-7 seems like the mark where you're pretty much guaranteed a playoff spot. So it would be nice if the Saints were so good they would do 12-5, 13-4. You wouldn't have very many questions about which direction the Saints are going to continue to go in if that happens. So a lot of Saints fans probably want us to fail because, when it's all said and done, if DA is DA and Derek Carr is Derek Carr, we're going to end up mediocre again. But my optimistic view is that we can be a good team. And there was a stint with Sean Payton when we were 7-9 for 3 years in a row, and I personally was thinking, well, maybe we've gotten all of it out of him that we're going to get, and it's time to move on. But we didn't, and we ended up doing pretty good for 5 years after that stretch. Almost made the Super Bowl and all that. Now, I don't think Dennis Allen and Derek Carr have it in them to get us there. But if we finish 10-7, we make the playoffs, and we happen to win a playoff game, then I guess you can't really argue with continuing in this route. Most of us would love to see Spencer Rattler become an NFL quarterback for the Saints and perform at a high level. There is a lot of excitement when it comes to Spencer Rattler. Not any excitement when it comes to Derek Carr or, for that matter, Jake Haener. But there's still a lot of nervousness and worrisome feelings for me if we're going to go into any season with Derek Carr or a rookie like Spencer Rattler. So optimistically, I'm going 10-7. That's my final record prediction. That's the record I predicted the Saints would have last year. We finished 9-8, just one game under that prediction, and hopefully we'll be able to do it. This is all going in blind. You know it. We haven't seen this team and what they're going to be able to do. It's going to take a while. I think it's going to be after week 8 before we really get a grasp on what this team is. But I'm going to go ahead and take a shot anyway. First, I'm going to talk about every player that's going to be featured and what I'm kind of expecting they'll do and what I'm kind of hoping they could do. If this is a team that's going to go 10-7 and we're going to be relevant and we're going to make the playoffs, then some of this is going to have to be, pretty close to the truth. And I don't think any of it's too blown out of proportion. So let's start with the quarterback, Derek Carr. Last year he finished 70% completion. It's pretty good, really, really good, somewhere around that area. And we got used to Drew Brees completing 68 to 73% of his passes every year. So I predicted Carr would finish with 65%, and he did a hell of a lot better than that. So I'm going to go ahead and say Carr is going to finish with a 67% completion. He's only broken 30 passing touchdowns once in his career. Last year, I thought he'd get 35. He only had 25. This year, I'm pumping the brakes, but at the same time, I'm expecting him to get a career high in touchdowns. I'm going to say 33. And I'm only going to predict 10 interceptions. Last year I predicted 13. He only threw 7 or maybe 7, I think. And if he can have 33 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, that's going to be pretty impressive. If he has 25 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, that ratio is acceptable. But I expect Carr to get more than 25 touchdowns. I expect him to break 30. I'm going with 33. And in order for his receivers to achieve the marks that I have predicted for them, he's going to have to throw for over 4,000 yards. I'm going to go with 4,250. That's very attainable for Carr. Last year he had 3,800. So he'll have to do better than that. So those are the numbers I'm expecting for Carr. 33 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 4,250 yards, 67% completion. And yeah, that's pretty good. It's probably not going to get you in the Pro Bowl, but it'll be close, and it'll be his best season ever if he does something like that, I'm assuming. Wide receiver Chris Olave. Well, I only thought he'd catch 70 balls, and last year he caught, I think, close to 90. The question is, can he get over 100? I don't know if he does that or not. I think our offense is going to scheme him open quite a bit, but we're also going to have to utilize everybody in this offense for it to be effective. You can't just feed one person constantly. But I'm still going to go with a pretty big year for Olave. 85 catches for 1,150 yards. That'll be an average of 13.5 yards a catch. And I expect him to get 7 touchdowns. I don't think he's broken 5 touchdowns in a season yet in his 2 years. So it would be another really solid year for Olave, but it would be a career year in touchdowns if he can get into the end zone 7 times. So I'm going with Olave, 85 catches, 1,150 yards, 7 touchdowns. Rashid Shaheed, I'm going to say he gets 38 catches at 17 yards a catch. So 38 catches for 646 yards and 6 touchdowns. That would be a career high for him in touchdowns as well. Now, a lot of people expect Rashid Shaheed to be, this big time wide receiver, a big player in the league. And yeah, he's the chances of him catching over 50 balls, I think it's slim right now. He's an undrafted guy. He hasn't shown that he can do everything, the little nuances that a wide receiver needs to do to be that effective. I'm still expecting him to be a big playmaker. I actually expect him to carry the ball about 20 times this year too, on reverses and stuff like that. Probably at 7 yards a clip, 20 carries for 140 rushing yards. But yeah, altogether, Shaheed receiving and rushing, he still won't break 1,000. Now, all purpose with his return ability, he'll break 1,000. But as far as receiving, I'm going 38 catches, 646 yards, 6 touchdowns. Would be massive amount of touchdowns for Shaheed. Juwan Johnson. Now, right now, we have on the depth chart, the week leading up to Carolina, we have Foster Moreau as tight end 1, Taysom Hill as tight end 2, Juwan Johnson as tight end 3, Dallin Holker tight end 4. This is because Johnson's been hurt. He's not acclimated right now. Foster Moreau's a better run blocker. So let's start the season with Foster Moreau as our starter. He's been there throughout the entirety of camp, and he's got a grasp on this. And then Taysom Hill is going to be a featured player, regardless of who's on top of the depth chart. Hill's going to be featured at fullback, wide receiver, all kinds of stuff, so running back. So I expect Hill to be a big player at tight end and all those other positions. But yeah, we'll start the season with Moreau, and I think eventually Johnson's going to be the guy that gets a lot of playing time once he gets acclimated to the playbook and practicing and everything else. So I'm going to expect Johnson to finish with a pretty big year, 46 catches, and I think he had 38 last year. He had between 30 and 40. He didn't have a good year last year. He almost had 400 receiving yards. He missed some time. But this year I think he's going to have 46 catches, probably 14 yards a catch at 644 yards for the year. And I expect him to find the end zone quite a bit. It's one of my big-time shocking predictions is I think Juwan Johnson is going to have 7 receiving touchdowns. And if Olave gets 7, it'll be a career best for him. If Johnson gets 7, he'll tie his career best. And I think 7 receiving touchdowns is going to be, tops on the team, leads the team when the season's over. And I think that'll be split between Olave and Johnson. I'm expecting a lot out of the tight end position this year. And I'm expecting a lot out of Juwan Johnson if he's going to get significant playing time. He would have to catch three or 4 balls and stay healthy for the majority of the season to get these numbers. I'm expecting him to catch 3 balls a game, 3 to 4. And I do expect these players to miss time. When I factor these numbers in, I always factor them around 15, 16 games instead of 17 because everybody misses time. We'll see if Johnson can have this kind of a year, 7 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara. Well, let me talk about Taysom Hill first. I think he's only going to catch about 24 balls when it's all said and done. The most he's ever caught in a single season was around 30-something. So I think Hill will be a receiver, he'll be a runner, and he'll be a blocker. When it's all said and done, he'll probably carry the ball 24 times. He'll probably catch the ball 24 times for like a 12-yard average. He might get 2 touchdowns receiving, 288 yards, something like that. 24 catches, 288 yards. And I feel like Foster Moreau will have even less than that. I don't think Moreau's going to catch about 18 balls for 144 yards and no touchdowns. If Moreau can get a significant amount of catches in this first game, and we know he's starting, then we can have a flip-flop here, and you'll see Johnson's numbers for Morrow, and then Morrow's numbers will be Johnson's. But I think Johnson is our number one guy when it's all said and done, and Hill will be right behind Johnson. Hill could have a hell of a lot more receptions than 24. But for right now, that's what I'm predicting. No touchdowns for Morrow. 2 receiving touchdowns for Hill. And the other receivers, well, if Cedric Wilson is going to be our true number 3, and because he can run block, I expect him to be on the field quite a bit when we're not in 2 tight end set. I think Wilson will end up with around 34 catches, 272 yards. It's like 8 yards a catch. He'll probably have a couple of touchdowns. And those numbers could easily be A.T. Perry's numbers. But I'm having a hard time seeing Perry on the field. If Olave's performing and Rashid's performing and Cedric Wilson is run blocking better than A.T. Perry, then A.T. Perry might not get that much time. Of course, injuries and everything else, Perry might be able to factor in there. But last year, Perry only had 12 catches. This year, I'm expecting him to get 20. But I expect him to average like 20 yards a catch because he's a big play machine. He'll probably have a couple of touchdowns. But at 20 yards a catch, if he catches 20 balls, he'll still have 400 receiving yards. And that's where I'm at on receiving. Bub Means make 10 catches for 80 yards, no touchdowns. Bub Means might be in on some garbage time if we're winning, or might see the field if there's a lot of injuries, but I'm only expecting him to catch 10 or 12 balls. Now let's talk about rushing. Alvin Kamara, this is the thing. Can Kamara get back to the old Kamara in this system? Can we see 1,500 all-purpose yards receiving and rushing from Alvin Kamara? You know, his career year in 2020, I think he had close to 1,800 all-purpose yards, close to 1,000 rushing and 1,000 receiving. This year, I expect him to be really close to that, but not quite. But I do think Kamara ends up with 1,500 all rushing and receiving. So I'm going to go with Kamara carrying the ball for 224 carries for 896 yards. That'll be 4 yards a carry. 896 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns. 224 carries, and then I think he'll catch 80 balls for 640 yards. That'll be about 8 yards a catch. And he could do way more than that, but 80 catches, 640 yards, 4 touchdowns receiving, 7 touchdowns rushing. So I think he'll have 11 total touchdowns, and he'll be right over 1,500 all-purpose or rushing and receiving yards. So I think it's going to be a huge year for Kamara, and this is the player that needs to perform at this kind of level for this offense to work and for us to have a winning record, 10-7, 11-6. If we're going to be a good team, Alvin Kamara is going to have to be a huge part of that. We're going to have to see 900 rushing yards and over 600 receiving yards. We're going to have to see a 1,500-yard season from Kamara. That's what I'm predicting. And as far as Taysom Hill goes, last year he had 80 carries, and he should have had more. This year I'm expecting him to be involved a little bit more as a running back and end around. So if Hill gets 100 carries, it'll be what I'm expecting, because I expect Hill to be our number 2 back after Kamara. So I expect 102 carries, 5 yards a carry, 510 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns rushing. Hill's a guy you want to see in the red zone. I know Jamal Williams is a red zone threat, and we didn't use him. Well, Hill's the guy. We should be doing it the whole time. Kamara should be used in the red zone as well. We didn't do enough of that last year. So Hill doesn't get 100 carries, and he only gets 60 or 80 carries. Then I think those other touches are going to come in the form of receiving. So he'll either have 40 receptions and 80 catches, or he'll have 80 rushes He'll have 40 catches and 80 rushes, or he'll have 100 rushes and 20-something catches. But I expect Hill to be involved quite a bit. 7 total touchdowns for Hill. That's what I'm thinking. 100 carries for 500 yards. 20 to 30 catches for around 300 yards. 5 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. Hill's going to be a huge part of this offense. I think Jamal Williams, when it's all said and done, is only going to average another 3.7 yards a carry because he's going to be used in short yardage situations. He'll probably get 64 carries, maybe only 44 carries. He gets 60. If Williams gets 64 carries, he'll have 237 yards, and he'll probably have about 4 touchdowns. He might catch 10 balls for 50 yards. So yeah, I'm spouting off a bunch of numbers. It's hard for me to even read them, and even harder for you guys to follow them, probably because I don't have my whistles and bells. But I will have those whistles and bells within the next 2 weeks. Let's talk about the defense now, and this is really what's going to do it. If our offense can perform and put up those kind of numbers, it'll be great. Just remember, our offense was ranked in the top 10 last year. It didn't feel that way, but we were. So this will put us in the top 10 again. And our defense was ranked in the top 10, and I think we're going to go from a top 10 ranking to a top 5 ranking this year. And it all starts with Chase Young. I think he'll have 12 sacks when it's all said and done, probably around 10 tackles for losses. The thing about Chase Young is he affects the quarterback and he affects the play every time. So he usually only gets 7.5 sacks, but other players around him are going to get a lot of sacks because the quarterbacks and the running backs are all going to be running away from this guy, right? Maybe they'll run right at him, and we'll see how good of a run defender he is. But if it's a pass play, Young's going to affect it. The quarterback's going to have to move into the open arms of everybody else on our team, on our defensive line and our linebackers. So I think when it's all said and done, Young gets 12 sacks. But he's going to affect it in a way that's going to help everyone else. Carl Granderson's going to get 8 sacks. That's his standard number. He'll probably have about 12 tackles for losses. Everyone's going to benefit from Chase Young being on this line. Cam Jordan is going to see time at defensive tackle. When it's all said and done, Jordan will probably only have about 4 tackles for losses. He'll probably have 4 sacks. I'm not expecting a lot from Jordan, but he only had 2 sacks last year, so 4 sacks would be pretty good. I don't expect him to be on the field as much as Young and Granderson when it's all said and done. Bryan Bresee at defensive tackle. Last year he had 4.5 sacks. This year I think it goes up to 6. Another benefactor from Chase Young, forcing quarterbacks out of their spot. Bresee will probably have about 8 tackles for a loss. I think Nathan Shepard's going to have 4 sacks. He'll probably have about 6 tackles for losses. So that's how I'm looking at that defensive line. And if they can perform at these numbers, then your top 5 defensive linemen are going to end up with 24 sacks between them. 24 sacks just from the defensive line. I'm not including Peyton Turner or Isaiah Foskey. You may get a couple more from Peyton Turner. But yeah, I'm expecting 12 sacks from Young, 8 sacks from Granderson, 4 sacks from Jordan, 6 sacks from Bresee, 4 sacks from Shepard. That is 34. That is 34 sacks from your defensive line. Last year, I think the Saints only had 32 sacks. So if the defensive line can get 34 on their own, that would be huge. I'm predicting this team to break 40 sacks easily. Remember, 2 years ago we had 46 sacks, and then last year we had 32. It was a big drop-off, and the reason why was Cam Jordan couldn't be found, and Caden Ellis took his 7 sacks somewhere else. So that was where we lost our sack production. I think we get it back with Chase Young. And this defensive line is going to produce 34 sacks. I think when it's all said and done, we're going to have more than 45 sacks. There's a chance this team can reach 50 sacks. So how do the linebackers do? I think Demario Davis will get 4 sacks. He'll have 10 tackles for a loss, and he'll have over 90 total tackles. I'm hoping Demario Davis finds the end zone this year. I don't think he has a touchdown in his career. It would be nice for Davis to get an interception or a fumble return for a touchdown this year. It would be a nice little cherry on top of a brilliant career. Davis has had 6-7 sacks in each of the last 2 years. So if he only gets 4, it'll be a little less than normal. But like I said, I believe the defensive line is going to take care of a lot of this year. Pete Werner, don't know if he has a sack in his entire career. I think he's only going to get 1. It'll be a nice moment when it happens. He'll probably have 3 or 4 tackles for losses. I also think Pete Werner is going to have over 80 total tackles. He usually does. Davis and Werner are going to lead the team in tackles. How about Willie Gay? Well, he'll probably have 3 sacks. I'm expecting him to put up a couple of sacks and have a big number in tackles for losses, somewhere around 8. I think Willie Gay is going to be active behind the line of scrimmage when he's on the field. How's the secondary going to do? I think even though Marshawn Lattimore is our number 1 cornerback, I still think the big numbers are going to come from Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor. I'm looking at Alontae Taylor being a huge surprise when it's all said and done at nickel for this team. I think that's why we're starting Jordan Howden at safety. We're going to play a lot of single high safety. We're going to have Tyrann Mathieu floating around towards the line of scrimmage. We're going to have Alontae Taylor at nickel floating around the line of scrimmage. So put your players where they're best suited. Howden's the starting safety opposite Mathieu. Mathieu can play anywhere at safety. So let's put Jordan Howden deep. Let him do what he does best. And let everybody else play man and have Tyrann Mathieu breaking on the ball closer to the line of scrimmage. And yeah, we're going to try to create a lot of turnovers. How's it going to work? I think Lattimore is going to end up with 4 interceptions. If he stays healthy, if he can play 15 out of these 17 games, he'll end up with 4 interceptions. He'll probably have 10 passes defensed. He may even have a defensive touchdown. But I think Adebo and Taylor are going to have more interceptions. I think Adebo's going to end up at 5. And he's going to have about 14 passes defensed. He had 18 last year. I think Alontae Taylor is going to surprise everyone with 5 interceptions. And I think he's going to have 17 passes defensed. I think he had 17 last year. Taylor's an exceptional player. He'll probably get 3 sacks. And I think Alontae Taylor may find the end zone as well. Tyrann Mathieu will definitely find the end zone. Can he get 2 this year? He almost had 2 last year. Last year we had 3 total defensive / special teams touchdowns. So Tyrann Mathieu had an interception return for a touchdown. We had, I think, a Rashid Shaheed punt return for a touchdown. And then we also had a blocked punt that was recovered for a touchdown, though I believe it went in the stats as a forced fumble by Nefi Sewell and a fumble recovery touchdown for DeMarco Jackson. But yeah, 3 total defensive / special teams touchdowns. This year, I think we might get 4. Because I think Davis is going to find the end zone for the first time in his career. And I think either Lattimore or Taylor may find the end zone once. And I believe Matthew's going to find it twice this year. To go along with his 5 interceptions and his 12 passes defensed. You know, Tyrann Mathieu has the number 1 PFF coverage grade over the last 2 years of any safety in the league. I think that's wild. I know PFF grades don't matter much, but they say over the last 2 years, the best coverage safety in the league is Tyrann Mathieu. And putting him at the line of scrimmage and letting him cover all kinds of stuff, I love it. So yeah, I believe we're going to have 20 interceptions this year. We had over 12 last year. I don't remember how many we had, maybe 16 last year. I think we can get 20 this year, and I think we can get 45 sacks. If we do that, and that defense pulls out these numbers, wow, great. Great for the Saints. So I'm looking at a huge year from the team, and this is severely optimistic, and I already said at the beginning of this video, no one really knows, and we won't really know until after week 8, after game 8. So, yeah. How about offensive MVP? I'm going to go with Alvin Kamara with his 1,500 total yards. A lot of people are leaning towards Chris Olave as well, and you can't count out Taysom Hill. And if this team is very successful, Derek Carr might be in that mix too. But I'm going to say offensive MVP, Alvin Kamara. Defensive MVP, most people want to give it to Demario Davis. Last year, I gave a tie between Davis and cornerback Paulson Adebo. This year, it's going to be one of those two guys or cornerback Alontae Taylor, which would be a shock. But I believe cornerback Alontae Taylor is going to be the most improved player. He has been throughout camp, might have been the camp MVP. And I think he's going to be the most improved this year for the Saints, and he might be so improved that he is our defensive MVP. Another most improved candidate could possibly be Trevor Penning. If Trevor Penning remains the starter at right tackle, and he can play 17 games, and he puts out an average tackle output, he doesn't get Derek Carr killed, and he's effective in the run, then it's a huge improvement. And you got to say, yeah, most improved player. If Penning survives this season, could very well be Penning. I'm also thinking that wide receiver A.T. Perry could be one of our most improved players if he can get a lot of reps. I think he's only catching 20 balls, but if he can catch 30 or 40 balls, he'll be way improved. And another potential most improved candidate is tight end Juwan Johnson, if he can get back to 7 touchdowns and over, 500 yards receiving. The most disappointing player for the Saints this year will more than likely be offensive tackle Trevor Penning. He's already a disappointment. And a lot of people want to say it's Derek Carr no matter what he does. Another very scary possibility for most disappointing could be Chase Young. How that would hurt. I would hate it for it to be Rashid or Olave. But it could also very well be second-year pro Jordan Howden at safety for most disappointing. But I'm going to say it's Penning, and we end up with Oli Udoh out there. And if Penning can survive, then he'll be one of the most improved. Offensive Rookie of the Year has got to be Taliese Fuanga. He'll start, play all 17 games. He'll look great. Maybe not reach the Pro Bowl, but, be a good, effective left tackle. Can he perform as good as Andres Peat? Because remember, we only allowed, I think, 31 sacks last year. It was like 7th in the league. And at the beginning of the season, we were worried about Carr surviving. And by the time the season ended, with that patchwork offensive line of Andres Peat at left tackle and James Hurst at left guard, and remember, Ryan Ramczyk was still playing at right tackle. We only allowed 31 sacks. It was 7th in the league, 7th fewest in the league. So can we allow that few sacks this year? Probably not. Oh, especially with Penning playing. But, we'll see. What else are some numbers to look at? Interceptions, I think we can break 20. I think we can get 3 defensive / special teams touchdowns. And as far as sacks allowed, I'm hoping less than 40. If you allow 40, that puts you right in the middle of the pack in the league. So it didn't feel like we were top 10 in the league in sacks allowed. But hopefully we can remain in the top 10, and we're only allowing like 34, 35 sacks. But we'll see. How about Offensive Rookie of the Year, Spencer Rattler? Could that happen? Well, yeah, I don't think they're going to demote Carr on performance unless we're 2-6 after 8 games, something like that. I still don't think Dennis Allen will do that. But if something unfortunate happens and Carr gets injured, and then Spencer Rattler becomes our backup, the guy that goes in and plays the rest of the season, it's very possible Spencer Rattler could be our offensive rookie of the year. I don't wish bad things on anybody. It's just something that could happen. If Spencer Rattler has to play 10 games, we'll probably consider him the offensive rookie of the year over Fuanga, even though Fuanga plays 17 games. If Rattler goes out there and looks great, right? Defensive rookie of the year for the Saints, well, it's either going to be McKinstry or defensive tackle Boyd. Boyd will get a lot of playing time, and I'm not sure how much playing time Kool-Aid McKinstry is going to get. But defensive rookie of the year, when it's all said and done, for the numbers, McKinstry Kool-Aid gets in there, maybe gets an interception or two. Maybe if Kool-Aid has to play a few games, he'll get more stats, and then we'll give it to him. So there you go. That's my long video talking about all the players and all the different accolades and highlights and how good is this team. I'm going to keep this, and halfway through the season I'm going to pull them up and look at it, and we're going to compare. We're going to project. I did this last year. We're going to project final stats based on where the team is at the halfway point, and then we're going to compare it to what I've predicted. And then at the end of the year we'll do it again. I did that last year. It's on the breakdown of the Saints and final season breakdown. So I normally have more whistles and bells, and usually when I'm spouting off all these numbers, I have nice little graphs to look at, and the numbers are up there, and I don't want to be like every other Saints outlet that treats everything like a podcast and just talks. I'm your family member, your coworker, and we're just shooting the breeze, right? So if you see me and say, hey, Joe, what do you think Carr's going to do this year? I think he's going to be 67% completion. Hopefully he throws for over 30 touchdowns. I don't think he's going to throw more than 10 interceptions. He's not a turnover machine. He'll probably complete 67 to 70% of his passes because he's going to be check down Charlie. And if this offense is designed good enough for him to get the ball out fast, then yeah, he could definitely get it to playmakers in space and have a lot of great things happen. I think Kubiak is a better coach than Pete Carmichael. And when it comes to benefiting the quarterback, with Pete Carmichael, everything was on the quarterback, and Drew Brees was the guy that could handle it. And lots of quarterbacks came in place of Brees and had some success, and maybe that was Sean Payton's coaching, or maybe the offense can lend itself to production from other players. You have to be an exceptional quarterback, I believe, to really get that offense and to do it well. And Kubiak's offense seems more like quarterback friendly, where get rid of the ball. You only have 3 spots to look at. Check the ball down every time and let the guy do something in space. And we're going to have so much motion and play action, it's going to benefit you. And the ball's going to be going all over the place. It's not just on Derek Carr. It's going to be on Chris Olave when he catches that short crossing route and turns it upfield and gets some yak. Or Alvin Kamara, or, Taysom Hill and the running game. And so, yeah, I expect a lot from this offense. More than what we got last year. And we were in the top 10 last year. So I expect better than that. Probably 8th overall offense. And Derek Carr is going to have to be consistent and, put up the numbers that I'm talking about. 4,250 yards. That's not a lot to ask for from a quarterback these days. Drew Brees threw for over 5,000 5 times. So just get 4,250 yards and throw for 67% completion. Keep your interceptions down to 10. Don't get sacked more than 40 times. And we'll be all right. So yeah, this is the kind of guy I am. We'll see what happens. If you guys have any contradictions or any predictions of your own, leave them in the comments. I'm Joe. My videos will get way better than this. Just give me 2 more weeks. And until the next one, subscribe to Rosenfield 10 for much more videos about our beloved Bless You Boys in black and gold, the New Orleans Saints. And until the next time, I'll talk to you later. Who dat?